Hello there, and welcome once more to the Open Door Show from propertyCEO. It's good to have you here. I've seen you for a while, been a bit of a break, hasn't it? But look, we're back and here we are. Over the next 30 minutes, as always, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of small-scale property development. We're going to be talking to some of the movers and shakers, people that are doing things out there in this industry. In fact, yes, we are definitely going to be talking to someone today. So a real treat for you. Above all, and most importantly, we've got to have a bit of fun. So we always have a bit of fun here on Open Door, regardless of what's going on out there in the world. So hopefully you are going to participate in that. So what are we doing on today's show? Well, we have the wonderful, the fantastic, and a partnership arrangement of ours we have with PIN. It's Mr. Simon Zutshi. And a lot of people, if you don't know Simon, if you don't, well, I mean, I don't know where you've been over the last 20 or so years, but Simon has been investing in property since 1995. Yeah, he really is that old. Okay. And he set up the Property Investors Network in 2003. He is a very experienced investor, an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and that's quite relevant to what we might be talking about today, because I've got something in mind I want to ask him. But most importantly, let's bring him along. Simon Zutshi, how are you?
Ritchie, I'm very well, thank you. And it's great to be on the Open Door Show today.
Did you like your build-up?
I did, yeah, it's great. I hope I don't disappoint now after the build-up.
You better not. You better not.
Absolutely. Pressure's on now.
Pressure is. And as I mentioned out there, a lot of people will be familiar with this, Simon, and we work in partnership. Our two businesses, we're independent, we work in partnership. So we make sure that all of our clients, your clients and our clients, are all looked after in the same way. So we're really pleased to promote anything that Simon's doing, and I think there's going to be an interesting discussion today. So it's been a good partnership so far, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and we don't really teach development as such, so we're very happy to put people to you, and we know you're going to look after them, and you've got the same kind of values as us. So really happy to keep doing that, and I'm hearing great feedback from everyone who's doing a training, Richie. So you're doing a good job, obviously.
Well, I think we are. And likewise, I think, and the values thing, I think, is what Simon said. That's so important out there in this industry. If you're going to commit and you're going to invest your time, most importantly, I think, because you can't get time back, but indeed the money, the financial investment, you want to know that those values are aligned. And we have written values that we both agree to in both firms. So it puts your mind at rest. You're looked after. So, Simon, I mean, look, I think it's an interesting chat. We're back here. We're in September now. A lot of people have been away on a bit of a break. Interest rates are still fairly high. The world's quite tough in property development, particularly for our audience. Let's just have a little think about it and chat about it today, because it's going to lead on. I know almost certainly you're writing a new book, and I want to pick you up on that today. So we'll come to that in a minute. But in terms of investing at the moment, what sort of difficulties do you come across? What are people telling you that they're finding difficult at the moment in the marketplace?
Yeah, well, obviously the big thing that's on a lot of people's minds is obviously interest rates. Bear in mind that a lot of people have unencumbered property. 25% of property are unencumbered, so they're not affected. And a lot of people have fixed mortgages, so they're not affected. However, a lot of people have variable mortgages, and they're very affected by rates, homeowners and also investors. And importantly, a lot of people are coming off fixed rates this year, so they're going to have a real shock when they go on to a high variable rate. So understandably, interest rates is a big concern. What that actually means is people who are looking to buy properties are sometimes struggling, particularly with single lets, to get them to stack up. Many sales are falling through. So the good news for us is the general feel is the property market is still coming down. There's still this uncertainty. I think more and more sales are coming through. There will probably be more and more motivated sellers. So actually, that's really good news for us as property investors and developers. However, because of the uncertainty, I think what I'm seeing, Richie, is a lot of people saying, oh, I'm not so sure for now is a good time. Maybe I'm going to wait. And I think the problem is that people come back from the summer holiday, where maybe they've been off, the kids have been off from school. And typically people get back into the swing of things in September, which is a great time to get some momentum so you make the most of the rest of the year. I think there's a real danger, Richie, that if people don't get going quick enough, before they know it will be the end of the year and the next 3 months will have just disappeared. And we're into 2024 and they'll think, what the hell's happened to the year?
I think so. And I think, I know there's a lot of you out there that, maybe 2023 has not been such a good year, and I feel for you. But you can do something about it. I mean, you're listening to this. You're trying to do something about it, and it's not easy. I know that, and taking that leap of faith is not easy. But as Simon said, really capitalize on that momentum that we all have back in 2023 to do something about it. And almost, I often say to people, whatever you think is blocking, even in your mind, is blocking you about, could I do this? Can I do this? We can unblock that. We can sort that for you. But going back to these interest rates, Simon, when you talk about properties, we're also talking about commercial buildings. A lot of our audience that listen to Open Door are interested or looking over the parapet, getting into development. Yeah. And buying maybe some existing buildings, commercial buildings that we could convert into residential. And of course, these existing commercial landlords, a lot of those will be in a similar positions with mortgages, fixed rates, variable, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that generally people who have commercial property are probably more experienced than residential investors. Some will go straight to commercial property and they hold it long term. But I think most people start in residential. Then they realize the hassle that can be, and they go into commercial where you've got repairing leases and you get paid 4 times a year, every 3 months. So I think that's a transition people make. And so I think there are probably more people in commercial property who might have unencumbered property than in residential. It's just a gut feeling. I don't have any stats on that, but I think that's probably correct. But yes, you're absolutely right. There are people who do have mortgages and payments have gone up, and the economy is having a difficult time. And I think actually, remember, commercial property is valued all on the rental income coming in and the quality of that tenant as well. And where more and more properties are becoming empty, I think actually it's probably more deals within the commercial property sector than there are in the residential sector. So, huge opportunity. But you're absolutely right. It does take a leap of faith. It does take courage to overcome the natural fear. And fear is good because it's there to protect you. But you're right, with the right knowledge and the right support and mindset, I think most people realize that actually it is a really good time. They just sometimes don't know what they need to do. And because of the challenge with finance, and because a lot of people are being put off, remember the key thing here is whether it's commercial or residential property, there are less buyers. So it is a buyer's market. There are more sellers than there are buyers. That's why prices are coming down. That's why you really want to get motivated, get looking for deals right now and secure those deals, because who knows how long this is going to keep going down for. And don't wait until it hits the bottom, because when it hits the bottom of the market and everyone thinks it's at the bottom, the media, the general public and the sellers, then sellers are less likely to do deals because they hold on with the hope that someone's going to come along and pay more money just because they've heard the market's going up.
Yeah. And I think going back to those owners, when we talk about the professional landlords, I think we mustn't forget as well, there are a lot of commercial owner occupiers, those people that have buildings for their business, but their business has dramatically changed over the last 2 or 3 years, and they still hold on to an asset which fundamentally they don't need. And so they often are highly motivated because their business can't sustain the mortgage payments which they might have.
And there's a big difference between a commercial landlord who is a landlord to their own business, which then probably feels a lot less risky than trying to rent it out to some other business over which they've got no control. So I think you're absolutely right. And with the changing, economics in the country, with the declining high street, there are lots of people who have traditional businesses that are not doing so well, and they might be saying, you know what, do I really want to do this for much longer? Or should I really retire, maybe retire early? I mean, think about things like, garages and things, MOT garages. In probably 5 or 10 years, those are going to be completely out of business because all cars will be electric, or a lot of cars will be electric by then. They won't have the same kind of requirements as you do have now. So there are lots of businesses that are going to change and adapt because of robotics and AI. And so you need to be conscious and look at what are the sectors that are going to be affected. And some of those might be ripe to convert to residential properties.
I do think there's an important discussion there, and I'm not sure we've got time for it on this Open Door, about the introduction of electric cars, because I'm not persuaded to go electric yet, purely because I'm a petrol head. So if it's not got a bunch of cylinders under the bonnet.
Well, you'd be surprised. So we've gone electric. We have a Tesla, and my wife is a bit of a speed junkie. And I tell you what, the acceleration on a Tesla is pretty good compared to most high performance cars. If you want that feeling of speed, it doesn't make the noise you get in a petrol car, and that's maybe what you want. But if you want that acceleration, go and test drive a Tesla. That's what I'd say.
I'm too old for the acceleration. It's all about the noise. It's about the feel, being at one with the vehicle. Anyway, we're not here to talk about cars. I wish we were, but we're not here to talk about cars. Look, I think the thing is, going back to this point of of now and the timing that Simon mentioned, because we talked about fear. A lot of people remember in 2008, there was a big financial crash. A lot of people made a lot of money then, Simon, didn't they? Because they took that leap of faith at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Now really feels like 2008 because of the uncertainty, because the market coming down. I mean, it's very different circumstance. That was due to the global financial crisis and the ensuing credit crunch. That was very different. But you know what? It does feel like that. And again, back then, as you quite rightly said, a lot of people sat back and did nothing. Those people who got busy did very, very well. And my recommendation, guys, you really want to look at the market right now, get the courage, get the knowledge, get the confidence, and go and do it. Because what you don't want is in 5 years' time to look back to 23, 24, saying, you know what, that was one of the best buying opportunities this decade, but I missed it, which is what many people do about the 2008, 2009 period, because they just didn't know what to do. And I know people who were buying a lot of property up to 2007 using creative finance, such as the Mortgage Express same-day remortgage. If you're a long-term investor, you'll know what I'm talking about there. And then because that one method changed, you couldn't do it anymore, they just stopped. They thought it was the end of investing. And you've got to adapt, you've got to change, recognize that the strategies and tools we use right now in a declining market might be different to the strategies and tools you used in the last 12 years where there was a booming market.
Let's talk about those strategies and tools then, Simon, because I think in the current market, we have, in some instances, we have problems with obtaining the finance. There is a lot of money out there, but some funders don't want to go for certain deals. Obviously, the interest rates are high. What are the alternatives that people can be thinking of, whether it's the residential buy-to-lets or primarily the commercial for the audience we're listening to us today? What alternative strategies or tools do we have that we could bring in?
So it's one of my favorite tools. And sometimes I refer to it as a strategy, but it is actually a tool. And that is lease options and purchase lease options. And actually just purchase options. So they're all very similar. And they are tools because they actually work in conjunction with every other strategy. If you're doing commercial to residential conversion, you can use lease options. If you're doing HMOs or service accommodation or just single lets, as long as the numbers work, you can use these powerful tools. And what you're actually doing is, rather than buying a property now, and maybe to buy that you would need to get finance, so that's the struggle, right? Rather than buying it now, what you're doing, you're taking on the responsibility of that property, so taking the hassle away from the owner and agreeing to buy a few years at a time. It's a few years in the future, rather. Now, importantly, if the market's coming down, you don't want to be agreeing to buy in a year or two because it will come down. We don't know how long it's going to come up. But if you can get a 3 to maybe 5 year option, well, hopefully the value is going to come down and then it's going to appreciate over time. So even if you're paying close to full price right now, and this is why an owner might agree to this, because anyone selling right now is probably going to have to take a discount on what the true market value is because the market's coming down. Well, we can go to a seller and say, well, I'll tell you what, if you don't need the money now, and that's a really important criteria for an option to work. And a lot of people have heard about options, they try and apply them, and they use them in the wrong conditions. If someone's selling a property because they need the money now, which the vast majority of sellers do, an option is probably not going to be an appropriate tool. Whereas if they're selling because they don't want the hassle, the responsibility, the liability anymore, and we could take that hassle and liability away from them, and if they sold, they just put the money in the bank, they don't need the money now because the bank's not going to give them a good return. So we can actually effectively give them more money, not only in the price, but we'll also give them a little bit of income each month until we actually buy that property. So we can use
those sellers that are perhaps in a lot of pain, and you know, we certainly don't suggest anyone preys on anyone as such for your own gain. But if someone is in pain because they can't afford, let's say that commercial owner occupier can't afford to pay that commercial mortgage, there's no one that wants to rent it, they're almost just going to be happy with a deal that gives them a price and a little bit of income. That's even better. So motivated sellers are going to be really keen for this.
So imagine this. Imagine you've got an empty commercial building and it may or may not have debt on it, but let's say it's got debt on it. So that owner is having to pay the mortgage, which might have gone up recently. They're having to pay the commercial, the council tax, or the commercial rates rather. They might have to have electric, gas standing charges. They're going to have insurance. They're going to empty a building. It could get broken into and vandalized. And they've got this money hemorrhaging out and no income coming in. If we take that property, if we were going to buy that property, well, we'd be getting finance and paying a mortgage. But instead of us getting new finance, maybe we take on their payment, which might be the same as, or might be slightly less than we could take payment out for. But here's the point. We don't have to put the big 25, 30% deposit in. So we're using less of our own money. We then do the work on the property, and I know you're a big fan of, buying things that have permitted development, which is a very smart thing to do. And I know one of the reasons you like that is because you say, well, it's a risk buying something that needs to get planning. It might not get planning. So that's a big risk. But you can de-risk that with a lease option, because what you're saying to the owner is, well, look, I'll agree to buy it in a few years' time, maybe even a year's time, but I just need to get the planning in place first. So what it does is it locks out any competition. No one else can come and buy that property within that time period. Only you could buy it, or someone you choose to sell it to, gives you the time to get the planning sorted. So let me give you an example. So one of my clients, Nick, he found an empty office block. I was on the market for 415,000. It'd been on empty for a while. I don't know if the owner had a mortgage or not, but still, Nick said, look, rather than reduce the price, I'll give you the full asking price, but I need to get planning permission on it. So he signed up a year contract. He didn't pay anything to the owner in the meantime, but what he did was agreed to pay the full price, and there was no one else queuing up to buy that property anyway. He got the planning, and with the planning for 8 apartments, that site was suddenly worth 560,000 instead of 415 he was buying it for. So because he'd added value through planning permission, he was able to come to Crowd Property, which, full disclosure, is one of my businesses, and say, hey, I've got this site. It's worth 560 according to Rick's valuation. I'm buying for 415. What will you lend me? And Crowd Property said, well, I tell you what, we'll lend you 400,000 towards the 415,000 purchase because you've added value before you bought it.
So he'd created his deposit out of the uplift in planning.
Exactly. Through that specialist knowledge and using that option to control it. If he'd have bought it, and he probably would have got the planning he wanted, but if he'd bought it, he would have had to buy it at a 415 price, put a 30% deposit in, maybe 35%, get a bridging loan, have the cost of that bridging loan, get the planning, hopefully, then he could do the work and refinance it. This way, he hasn't got to get the finance up front, hasn't had to put a big deposit in. So that's one of the many ways that we can use options. In fact, most house builders, the big builders, they don't even buy these big pieces of land. They go and get options with the landowners for maybe sometimes 25 years. They land bank it. When it's the appropriate time, they get the planning, they then buy it. Because if you're going to get finance, you generally need to own the plot so you can get the planning permission to enhance the value and then buy it. And that's a smarter way of doing it.
Isn't it about control? That's the word that we use.
It is absolutely. So it's not ownership, but it's control. So the owner can't sell it to anyone else within that period. You have exclusivity and anyone else is locked out for that time period. Now, you've got to be careful to make sure you get long enough, because once it gets to, a day after that period, the control goes back to the owner. And, if you haven't bought it by then or sold it to someone else, you lose control. Now, you could always renegotiate. You might pay an extra fee, extend the option period, but they're not obliged to do that if they don't want to. So you've got to be very conscious of time here.
And if you wanted to sell it on to someone else, you've got to have a back-to-back ability within that option agreement to do that. So it's about drafting that option agreement in the right manner, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you always want to use solicitors to do that. I mean, very often, Ritchie, you know this, in the property world, well, in everywhere, but certainly in the property world, there are sometimes people who they want to make all this money, but they don't want to spend any money to make the money. And if they're tight, they're going to make mistakes. So a lot of, I know an amateur, they say, oh, has anyone got a lease option agreement? They're asking on Facebook, right? Yeah. And you think that's unfortunately, that's going to go horribly wrong at some point for them. So you need to go to a solicitor who understands these things. And that's a bit of a challenge because many solicitors, unless they're a commercial solicitor, they may not really get it anyway, but it happens a lot in the commercial world. You sign up a contract, you always want to make sure it's assignable. So in the case of Nick that I talked about earlier, Nick's created the value of that. That site's now worth 560,000 with the planning permission. He's got the right to buy it at 415. He could just flip it on. Yeah. He could sell it to someone else at 500,000. So it's a good deal for them because it's worth 560. So they're getting a 10% discount. And what happens is because he's got the right to buy, the technical details are that what would happen is the new buyer who's buying at 500 pays the money to the seller's solicitor. The seller's only going to get the full 15 they're contracted to get. And for the sale to actually happen, for you to release the ability for them to buy, you get the difference between the 415 and the 500 they buy, which in that case is 85,000. So a really good strategy, by the way, is to find land, control it on options, get planning. And if you don't want to develop it yourself, you can flip it onto someone else.
So Nick would have sat there and made a cool sort of 85,000 quid by not doing too much.
Absolutely. Take off planning fees, probably at least £50,000. That's not bad, right?
No, that's not bad, is it? Okay, look, so with all of this, it's knowing what to do. I said I would mention it. Am I right in saying that I know you've been working on a book? I mean, your Property Magic book is probably the best-selling, best-known property book out there, but you've got a book here. Am I right in saying on lease options coming out soon?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, thank you for your kind words about Property Magic. We sold well over 100,000 copies. It's probably the most popular book in the UK about property investing, maybe because it's been around for 15 years. So we've been able to sell a lot over that time. But still, it's always hard to write a follow-up to a book like that. And in the last edition, I actually talked about wanting to write a new book, which I was going to call it No Mortgage Required, because you can control property without mortgage, and that's a big block for many people having to get finance. But actually, keeping in the vein of things, I've decided to call it Lease Options Magic. So it's kind of in the kind of magic series, if you like. And it's all about how to use lease options, whether you're doing commercial to residential, HMOs, SA, it works on all of them. And really, the book is designed to, first of all, raise people's awareness, because you don't know what you don't know. And I want to show all the different ways you can use these tools. First, so you go, actually, that's worked for me. So raise awareness, help create the belief, because people also think, well, it sounds great for us, Simon, but why on earth would an owner agree to do that? So I've written it so that you get it from their point of view. And I've also written it so you can actually give it to an estate agent, and the agent will see how the seller can benefit, how you benefit, and importantly, how they benefit. Because if you go to an agent and say, oh, yeah, I'd like to buy this, but not now, in 5 years' time, what do you reckon most agents are going to say, Ritchie?
Yeah, well, yeah, they just don't have a clue, do they? Because
they don't know. And they say, well, they think this sounds something creative, this sounds illegal, it sounds like a scam, and they're worried about not getting paid their fee. So I've written it to explain how actually, if you're buying through an agent, and you and I know that a lot of the best deals are off market anyway, but sometimes there are opportunities through agents. We want to make sure the agent sees that they can get paid in 3 to 4 weeks instead of 3 to 4 months. So as we said earlier, Richie, it's not about trying to rip anyone off. My investing is all about win-win. We want everybody involved, no matter who they are, to benefit from this transaction happening. And as I said before, there are many times when options are just not appropriate. So we say, look, when are they appropriate? When they're not appropriate, raise awareness and really help people understand if options is something they want to do or not. And the book costs 10 quid. And if they like that, they've got enough to get going. If they really want to learn a lot, they can come to some of our home study. And we'll teach them exactly what they need to do and teach them everything they need to know.
Have you got a home study course coming out on this as well then?
We have, yeah. So our home studies are a bit like your courses, which we don't just let people get on with it. We kind of like to add support. So they're not available all the time. We typically bring them out once or maybe twice a year. So we're bringing out our options training at the end of September. Depends when people are watching this, but that's coming out soon. And I'm sure you'll let people know about that as well. But go and get the book, and it will really help you understand if options is something that works for you or not. And I think we'll probably link below the video. People can go and register. And if you buy the book during the launch phase, we're going to have loads of online training that we would normally sell. I'm going to give it away, hundreds of pounds worth of training, just to really help you understand how powerful this is. Because in my experience, Ritchie, when I ask people about this, who's heard about options in a property room, maybe half the room stick their hand up. Then I say, keep your hand up if you've actually done an option. Most hands go down, probably apart from a few of my clients who are in the room. And the thing about this, I've been trying to write this for a number of years, but I've forced myself to get this out right now because this is the perfect market conditions. We did a lot of options and creative finance back in 2008, 2009 during the last crash. And you can do them in a rising market, but they are harder to find. now is absolutely the time to be using these creative tools to help you acquire more property. And think about that, Ritchie. If you've got a certain pot of money and you're out there, you might be limited to do just one development. But as property CEO, you teach people, well, you're not the person who's on site. You're not doing the project management. So in theory, you could do a number of deals, and the restraint might be the amount of money you have for deposits. Well, if you're not putting deposits in, it plays really well to your model, Ritchie. Maybe you do a number of deals at the same time.
Oh, it definitely does. I think, again, it comes back to that control. You know, if you are the CEO of a company, you have that time to go out and do it. You shouldn't be bogged down, as Simon says, on site. And it is then controlling a number of sites, even if you have just an option to buy them at a later date, even if it's nothing to do with planning, even if it's got permitted development. I think there's a great saying that I always have, and it is, you don't know what you don't know. And I think there might be a lot of people listening to this who think, I've got a little bit of knowledge of options. I think if this book's coming out, definitely worth grabbing that. As Simon said, we'll put a link in. When's it book due out, Simon?
It's going to be due mid to late September. Second or third week of September should come out.
Okay, so being September 2023, obviously, so as you're listening to this, it's there or thereabouts. We're going to put a link, as Simon said, we'll put a link in here. Click on that. You can register your interest for the book. I think that's what you can go through and do. Is that correct, Simon?
Yeah, and then if you do that, we'll give you a couple of videos as soon as you register, just to give you a couple of different case studies, see how we could, including one of our clients who used it to control a £1.4 million building. He got planning permission rate, like I described, increased the value to 2 million. And he's just trying to work out now whether he does the end development, which is going to be probably 5.5 million, or if he's going to flip it to someone else for a cool $500,000 plus profit. So we've got some case studies to help you understand it in the meantime, while you're waiting for the book to come out. And then if you buy during the launch period, we'll tell you when that happens. We give you a whole lot of extra online training for free, just to really help you get going on this.
I think that's excellent. That's a great offer. I think a few videos, because anticipation of the book, I'm sure we're going to get people interested in the book, and that's definitely going to be worth a read. I think then a few videos to keep you going. Case studies, everyone likes case studies.
Yeah.
And if then there's some free bonuses and other bits of training, that's great. And maybe folks look out for the home study course a little bit further down the line as well. I'm sure we'll certainly let you know, and Simon will as well. That is terrific. Simon, look, thank you for coming in today and recording this. I think it's brilliant. I think that's definitely going to be an exciting opportunity. I know we've talked some time ago now on options here on Open Door with yourself, in fact.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that this book's coming out is absolute perfect timing. I really encourage people to pick that up.
Thanks so much, Ritchie. Thanks for asking me to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. See you soon, my friend. Look after yourself. Wow. How about that? Simon's written another book. I mean, it's sold up everywhere you go. Someone's got a copy of his book. Anyone who's seriously interested in property has got Property Magic on the shelf. Well, next to it, almost certainly you should have Small Scale Property Development by propertyCEO, which, of course, why wouldn't you have that if you haven't got that? And definitely buy that. And next to that, obviously, the Lease Options Magic, Simon's book that's coming out. Click on the link below. We'll put the link up again now. Please click on that, go through and register for that. And as Simon said, lots of bonus content. Good stuff. Thanks for watching this edition of Open Door, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.